Hey guys, this is Brian for Better Chess Training, and in today's video, I'm going to cover three um, errors that beginners make in the opening. And if you are rated under, let's say, 1,000 or 1,100, you may be making some of these mistakes as well, or if you've just learned chess, try to avoid these mistakes. Okay, let's check them out. Okay, one of the big beginner mistakes in the opening that I see is moving too many pawns early in the game. Okay, and let's just, for example, we start here with e4, and our opponent plays e5. It's good to open with a pawn often because it opens up your pieces. Okay, but you don't want to use too many, and there's a couple of reasons for this. First off, your pieces, your knights, your bishops, and then your rook and your queen, your major pieces, are more powerful than the pawns. So you want to get them more active. We'll talk about that in a moment, but you want to get those pieces out from that back row and use them. The other reason why is because pawns can't move backward, and sometimes the uh, correct strategy or the correct idea with the pawns won't be relevant until we see what our opponent does. So we don't want to move too many pawns early because they might become a weakness later, or they might leave some holes behind as well. And you can look at some of my other videos on strategy to see what I mean by that. But the idea is move a couple pawns in the opening in order to open up your pieces. And here we'll look at an example. Knight to f3 gets that knight out, gets a knight out. And here we can play d4, called the Scotch, but we're just going to develop our pieces here. And we can quickly see that we don't need to, these pieces are active, okay? And here I'm just kind of not really looking at a specific opening, but the idea here is that you can see that it's more important to get these pieces out, see how active these pieces are, and sometimes an attack can even spring up from there. So the first tip is to try to get the pieces out, not move pawns too much in the open. Okay, the second beginner mistake that I want you to avoid, and I see it a lot with, especially when the kids play, is bringing the queen out too early. And there's typically two variations to this. And I've actually seen this in beginner chess books, so I kind of disagree with its inclusion. But the first one here, the e4, e5, queen to f3. And if black proceeds with something standard like knight to c6 and bishop to c4, if black's not paying attention and plays something like bishop to c5, then black will be very surprised when it gets hit by queen takes f7 mate. That is fool's mate, and a lot of beginner books have it. And if you're just playing around with your friends and you're not really friends don't really study chess, you could probably I see people get caught with it a lot. The problem with that is that it's very easy to stop with just a minimal amount of awareness, and so. For example, after queen to f3, since this pawn is not actually attacked, queen to f6 is already already stops it. Bishop to c. Oh, sorry about that. Let's see. After queen to f3, knight to f6, and then let's say we go bishop to c4. Then after bishop to c5, we are already getting ready to castle, and there is no mate threat. So really black is already at least equal here, and even though it's early in the game, it's already kind of tricky. For example, let's say he goes queen to b3, trying to threaten this check. Then black just castles, and there's no danger. Okay. The second variation to this is e4, e5, for example, and then queen to h5. And the trap here is that if black just carelessly plays g6, trying to attack this queen, then black gets hit with this fork. Queen takes e5 check, and capturing the pawn on 5, as well as forking the king and this rook. So after black blocks, white takes the rook. But again, this, with a little bit of awareness, is easily stopped. We could just protect the pawn with queen to c6, and after bishop to c4, again threatening that mate. Of course, if we play something like queen to f6, then queen takes f7 will be mate. But here, after knight to um, after bishop to c4, then uh, black can just play something like queen to e7. Okay, just protecting f7. So this is something that's very easy for black to defend. And let's say white continues on with knight to f3. Now black can take the offensive here with queen to f6 attacking this. I'm sorry, knight to f6 attacking the queen. So the bottom line is uh, don't start. This is something that again you're going to play a couple friends. You're going to be able to win. But after you start playing better players, you're never going to get this off. So it's better to practice kind of standard opening principles and just keep that queen back until it's time to bring her out. Okay. Okay. The third opening mistake that beginners make is they don't castle. Now there are some opening variations in some systems where you don't castle and you keep the king in the center because you're going into an end game where there's less danger to the king. But at the beginning stages, it's often a good habit to develop some of those back pieces, especially the ones on the king side or the side that you're going to castle on and just castle right away. Again, there's exceptions to this, but I see it more often than not that uh, player doesn't castle and then just ends up the king gets stuck in the middle with no protection. And here is an example actually from Grandmaster play, and this is from the game Potemkin versus Alekhine, a famous game, St. Petersburg. And I'm just going to go through the opening moves quickly here. Alekhine, the fourth world champion, is playing the black pieces here. So e4, c5, g3, g6, bishop to g2, bishop to g7. So these are both masters. So you can see they're developing their pieces. Knight to e2, knight to c6, c3, knight to f6, and then knight to a3. This would have been a nice place to castle here. d5 is played. So Alekhine, and again, the game isn't totally lost, but Alekhine here attacks the center because white has not castled yet. Um, white takes, black takes here with the knight, and then white takes this maneuver here to try to play d4. And again, the issue here is that the white king is stuck in the center, and um, sometimes now masters, they work out their opening systems and they work out what they think is going to happen, and so they know whether or not it's safe or not. But at the beginning level, again, it's just a good habit just to get that king safe, so you could work on the rest of your attack later. Really work on building up your attack and not try to attack too early. But here again, white fails to get the king out of the center. Let's take a look at what happens. Black castles. White plays his d4, which he's been preparing. And after he takes, the problem here now is that black's pieces are mobilized, bishop to g4, f3, and bringing it out here. Now the king side is not so nice for black to castle because move those pawns, the g3 pawn and the f3 pawn, so there's a lot of holes here. So he moves this knight over, but then gets hit by this check here by the queen. Decides to move to f2 that gets this rook out. But from here, we see that black's pieces are too active. Okay, so this knight now is coming in. Okay, knight takes, taking with the queen. And here he attacks here, but before moving the queen, he just checks him with this knight. Okay, and white tries to find some shelter here on the king side. Knight takes d4, queen takes f5, or I'm sorry, g takes f5. So black sacrificing the queen, but now these knights just jump on the white king here. Um, Notice that the king is cut off from the f2 square by this knight. So knight takes f5 check, king to g4, h5 check, king to h3, and then we have knight to f2 is mate. And this is kind of an extreme example, but the general idea is that if your opponent's well developed and you leave your king in the center, you should try to your opponent should try to break through and try to get at it if at all possible. But again, you can eliminate all of that complications by just castling early and working on your strategy. If you are making those opening mistakes, they're not too hard to eliminate it. Oftentimes, just being aware of those types of mistakes will help you to avoid them in your play. Besides that, you want to also follow sound opening principles. You don't need to memorize any specific openings when you're just starting out. It's really more helpful to just learn how to control the center, get your pieces active, and keep your king safe. If you can do that in the opening, you can uh, have a playable middle game where you'll be able to try to out strategize and outthink your opponent. But over here, I have a video on opening principles. So if you don't understand how to open a game, you might want to check that out. Otherwise, good luck in your chess. Let me know what you thought in the comments, and I'll see you next time.